Hello, and welcome to the Startup Show, brought to you by Inc. Authority. I'm your host, Trevor Rowley. You know, Inc. Authority is home of the Free LLC, but it's not just a business formation company. In fact, Inc. Authority provides goods and services to small business owners around the country to help them grow and scale their business, and even help them, once they've accumulated assets, to create an estate plan through their partnerships with attorneys. To talk to us about that today, please welcome our guest, Dan Morgan, who's a Senior Business Advisor with Inc. Authority. Welcome to the program, Dan.
Thank you, Trevor. Good to be here.
What do you do as a Senior Business Advisor at Inc. Authority?
Really get in there and understand our business owners' needs. We have a ton of business owners from all walks of life, so it's really our job to help them and challenge them with what their goals and their trajectories are for their company, so we can guide them on, hey, that's a great idea, let's build upon that. Or, hey, here's what we've seen most of our clients have success with, and build upon a model that we've built for over 30 years now. So really clients from all walks of life, but really getting in there and understanding their needs and helping them grow their business.
Yeah, it's a real differentiator between Inc. Authority and other business formation companies. There are good companies out there, but there are some serious and significant differences. And one of those differences is this business advisor role that Inc. Authority brings, and the people who come and do business with Inc. Authority get to take advantage of, like yourself. A seasoned individual who has been in business and has worked with many business owners can help them avoid the pitfalls of doing business. So, Dan, I know that most of the customers that you work with are in startup phase.
Yes.
They're just beginning things, and they, in many cases, don't know what they don't know yet. And you're there to hold their hand and help them to launch, grow, scale their business. But you also get to work with some seasoned business owners, some who have accumulated assets, and now they're at the point in their life where they're like, how do I make sure that what I have worked so hard to earn is passed on to my heirs? And how do I make sure that I avoid the probate process? And so tell me, what is a tool that is available to that type of a person, and how can you help them?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I think, and it's really important not just for somebody who has a ton of assets, but somebody who's just starting out to know where they want to get to. Because the whole name of the game when we're growing a business is to build wealth and acquire assets. So the question I get from clients all the time is, where do I put my assets? Well, when we're acquiring houses and assets and cars, the best place to hold those is in a revocable living trust. It gives you the power to hold your assets and control your assets without holding them in your name. So that's a really incredible tool that we have at Inc. Authority. And the proper place in a true estate plan is really the foundational piece is that revocable living trust.
Yeah, so I've heard about trusts quite a bit. And for those of us who may not be as familiar with it, you know, what exactly is a trust?
Good question. Yeah, so there's multiple different types of trust. The revocable living trust is an instrument that you can use and make changes to anytime you need to. It's a holding tool where you can put your home in it. You can hold any primary assets you have. Maybe you have a family, a guest house or something that you have. But it's also a place where you can have bank accounts and different assets that you're going to hold in there for the benefit of your beneficiaries. If God forbid something happens to you, you want to make sure your assets passed along to the proper beneficiaries, what your wishes are, not what the probate courts or anybody else might think, but what your wishes are, and it's a true instrument to do that.
So is a revocable living trust part of an individual's estate, or is it separate from their estate?
Yeah, really good question, because there's two different types of trust. There's an revocable living trust and an irrevocable trust. The biggest and primary difference is with a revocable living trust, it's still within your estate. You still have control of it. You can still benefit financially from that trust. On the contrary, an irrevocable trust, we're removing an asset from your estate and putting it outside of your estate. You cannot financially benefit from that. There's a time and place where that's necessary, but for a true startup and somebody acquiring assets that they want to take advantage of and benefit from, needs to go into a revocable living trust.
And I think that's the incredible part about a revocable living trust, right? Is the revocable meaning that you can change it or even void it while you're alive.
That's correct.
Because while you're a living person, you control everything about that.
You do.
But then once you pass away, what happens?
It becomes irrevocable. Yeah, and then your wishes are carried out, and you'll have your directives and your wishes and your will within the trust that's going to determine where those assets go. The executor of your trust is the person who executes the trust and carries out your wishes. Will carry out your wishes exactly as you've laid out in your trust, so nobody can get their hands in there and change it, which is important. We need to make sure that your wishes are carried out to the way that you want it to go.
Great. You know, I also hear about wills, you know, last wills and testaments, and I've talked to individuals before who have said, I'm not so sure about the need for a revocable living trust. I mean, I've got this will. Is a will good enough?
In some circumstances, I mean, I get that a lot, Trevor. I get that a lot. Hey, I've got a will. I don't think I need a trust. wills are good to have. I don't want to devalue a will. A will is fantastic. In fact, in our trust at Inc. Authority, we provide a will. The problem with a will is it could still be subject to probate, and we want to avoid probate. That's where we can get, there can be arguments amongst the family, assets can be tied up in the probate courts for years. So a will help in the probate process, but it doesn't prevent your assets from going into probate. That's why we want to have a revocable living trust. It'll keep your assets from ever going into probate, saving you years off of that potentially if those assets are subject and stuck in probate, and costs. You don't want to have to hire a probate attorney. They are very expensive these days, and that trust will help you prevent all of that.
Yeah. You read in the newspaper from time to time about celebrities, right, who have accumulated a lot of wealth, but they failed to go through the simple process of creating a revocable living trust. And then, should they untimely pass away, then now they've got this fight, right, for the assets, and it's going to go through the probate process, and it's crazy, right? And we don't want anybody to go through that process, which is one of the benefits of a revocable living trust. Who really needs a revocable living trust? Again, I've heard lots of different answers to this question. Some people saying, well, I think it's only for the wealthy or for the people that have a lot of assets. But is that the case?
No, that's not the case. So a big one I get all the time, hey, I'm young. I don't plan on that ever happening for a long time. Well, I'm young too, but I've also got 2 young daughters. I've got a 10-year-old and a 3-year-old along with my wife. My wife and I like to travel, right? If that plane goes down when we're going down to Mexico, I got to make sure that my 2 little girls are protected. So my assets are held in a trust so that if God forbid something does happen, we are protected. But on the same token, it's a great instrument while you're alive. You can put your assets in that trust so they're not in your name. I always use the old adage, Nelson Rockefeller said it best, right? He said the key to success is to own nothing but control everything. And that's where we want to be, because we don't want somebody to be able to look up our name on the public record and see all the assets we own. So by putting your assets in a trust, you'll gain some anonymity and some privacy on your estate by holding your assets in a trust. Now, one thing I will say, the common mistake, my last name is Morgan. I would recommend not naming it the Morgan Family Trust, right? We want to stay as anonymous as possible. So I typically tell my clients to come up with something creative and unique to you that somebody's not going to be able to peg or identify as you.
Yeah. So I think you've nailed a couple of things here really quickly about the benefits of having a revocable living trust. One is avoiding that probate process, which really is just awful. And second, this privacy element also that comes from utilizing a trust, because trusts really aren't registered or filed anywhere. They're private. And so those are some really valuable benefits to those who use a revocable living trust. I've also heard about the different components and elements that comprise a living trust. Now, you can go to a lot of different sources to have somebody create a trust for you, but not all trusts are created equally.
That is a fact.
And so tell me, about some of the essential components of a revocable living trust package.
Absolutely, and that is so true. I can't tell you how many clients come to us and they have a trust, and I'm always congratulatory. That's phenomenal, that's great. But then when we start to break apart the trust and look at the trust in its totality, we understand there's a few missing components. Every good trust should have, number one, the trust should be formed properly, but there's a really important element. It's called a certificate of trust. And this is critical because if you're going to a bank or you're going to a financial institution and you need to use your trust for any extent, you don't want them to be able to see the trust and all the assets within the trust. So if you drop all your trust paperwork in front of them, you don't want them to be able to see that. The certificate of a trust, think of it as a snapshot of the trust. You can see the name of the trust and the pertinent details without seeing all the assets within the trust. So that's a really important element of the trust that I don't see, frankly, quite that often. Inside the trust, we also need to have what's called our last will and testament. And one critical element that is unique to Inc. Authority that a lot of attorneys don't do is what's called a pour-over will or a pour-over provision. This is super handy because we don't typically want to have to go into the hassles of always registering our car into the trust. That's a common, a lot of my clients will change a car every 4 or 5 years, right? We don't always want to have to put that in and take it out. So the pour-over provision allows at the time of death, any assets that are not in the trust, the ability for those assets to pour into that trust. So that's another element. We've got to have all of our directives, our healthcare directives. Power of attorney for healthcare is big. Power of attorney for finance. If God forbid something happens to you and you become incapacitated or you're in a coma, you need somebody to be able to make important financial decisions and healthcare decisions on your behalf. So these are elements of the trust that are critical. And the last one, that's probably one of the most important, is what's called a quitclaim deed. We need to be able to transfer the title of your home from your name and into the trust. And oftentimes I'll see a legal team or attorney, they'll charge extra for a lot of that stuff. And I think the peace of mind that our clients get with Inc. Authority is it's all inclusive. We include all of those elements in the trust so they know they're getting the real deal with Inc. Authority.
Wow, that's fantastic and super, super valuable. I can think of a number of situations just right off the top of my head where somebody told me that they really wished that they had had a power of attorney, both for healthcare directive and for finance, because you can't always look into the future and know what's going to happen, and you want to be able to make those decisions or trust somebody to make those decisions on your behalf,
Big time.
rather than leave those to the hospital or to the government, et cetera. And so having those directives, absolutely essential.
We've seen it big time since the pandemic started, right? This has been a big thing on the rise with people wanting to make sure that they have all these directives in place. And that trust is such a clean and easy way to make sure that happens.
Yeah. Is it complicated because you're using terminology that may not be familiar to everybody? It sounds difficult, but is it really difficult?
It is not. So that's the beautiful thing. The wonderful thing about Inc. Authority, with all of our products, we make them simple. Our philosophy is we keep it simple. We let you work on focusing on building your business and growing your estate. The Revocable Living Trust, we send out a questionnaire to all of our clients, and that really gets the ball rolling. It's only about, it varies. It can be, the single trust can be about 8 to 10 pages. Joint between husband and wife can be about 15 pages or so. But it's really simple. We lay it out and we walk you through the whole trust, ask you the questions about your beneficiaries and your assets and your estate. The whole process we can get done in about 3 to 4 weeks. It doesn't need to take a long time. When me and my wife sat down and did it, it took us probably 30 minutes sitting down together. So.
And all of this is done, of course, under the eye of an attorney,
Yes,
who's making sure that everything is being prepared properly and recorded properly. And there's always somebody there that you can talk to who can walk you through these questionnaires, because it's a lot of questions,
It is,
right?
yeah.
And it has to be by its very nature, because you may have certain assets that you want to be part of the last will and testament to make sure that China goes to this person, and you may have certain things that you want to make sure that they go to various individuals, and all that has to be detailed. There may be situations where you may not want to release assets to somebody until they reach certain ages. They're going to receive a certain amount of income at age 21 and another at age 25 and so forth. So there can be a lot of detail built into these. And of course, this is where the back and forth with the legal team works, so that all of that can be put down, recorded, executed properly according to the wishes of the individual.
Yeah.
Like, how long start to finish to get it done though?
Start to finish, I'd say realistically, it can be done in as fast as 3 to 4 weeks. I mean, with some pretty good detail in there. Now, some of my clients, it takes some time. There's a lot of back and forth with the legal time, but you said it perfectly. Our legal team is phenomenal. They're there at the drop of the hat. If you have questions, there's a lot of language in that Revocable Living Trust that's foreign to a lot of our new clients. So having the legal team there to walk them through what an executor means, what a trustee means, and the different language there, that can be cumbersome. So it's important to have that. But in totality, with our legal team on it, we can get it done in 3 to 6 weeks tops.
Yeah. So some of that depends on how fast the customer can answer some of the questions.
Yes.
And it's okay to have questions, right? It's like,
okay.
I don't understand what you're asking me. Help me understand what might be best. And to have a legal team guide you through that process, absolutely essential. I know there are some products out there that are essentially do-it-yourself trusts, but you really want somebody that's a professional to help you through the process, right?
This is something you don't want to screw up. You need to have somebody there. I've seen the template ones and the do-it-yourself ones out there. No, thank you, because this is my family's future and my estate and my legacy I'm building for my kids. I need to make sure it's done right. And Inc. Authority does a fantastic job of that, making sure it's done right. And training onto the future. Let's say you go buy another home in 3 years. Call us. We got you covered. We can coach you through what that looks like as you're acquiring new assets.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's about peace of mind, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you work hard, you accumulate some things, you want to make sure that your beloveds have the ability to use those things and be able to take advantage of those things. You'd much rather have them use it than have to pay all of the probate fees and the state taxes and so on and so forth. Can you tell me about, an experience or a situation where, maybe somebody did it right versus when somebody did it wrong, and what the difference was?
Yeah, one comes to mind actually. I was working with one of my clients for actually a good 6 months getting his revocable living trust, and he just kept putting it off and putting it off. And one day I got a call from his cousin, I believe it was, and unfortunately he passed away. And that's been a situation that we've been dealing with, unfortunately, for a while now. And family are in communication with us, but unfortunately, he never did his trust. So the family's dealing with that right now, and it's just kind of, I feel for him because we were so close for him to make that decision to get it done. It wasn't something that we saw coming, but it happened, and it's something that the family's dealing with now. But if you would have just made that decision and taken 20 minutes with us to get it done and get it started, that could have all been alleviated. On the same token, we have had clients that started with us years ago to start their trust, and I always recommend my clients, make that be one of the first things you do. Get it done, get it out of the way, because then you can start to issue the ownership of your LLC or your corporation to the trust. Start doing things the right way from the start, because as you start to acquire assets, I've got clients that they started with us with one LLC, and now they've got 5 different properties or 7 different properties, and they set that foundation up properly to know they can go build their business and build their empire with their peace of mind, knowing that their family is protected.
Yeah, and I can tell you from personal experience too, my parents fortunately had a revocable living trust. My mom passed away, and a few years later my father passed away, but fortunately they had the revocable living trust in place. And so there were successor trustees that were named, and once they were gone, we went through our grieving period, but then in order to, settle the estate and make sure that those assets passed on to the children and all of those others that they wanted to have, it was a relatively simple, painless process. And I think that's what, my parents wanted, is they didn't want to leave a mess for those that they were leaving behind. They wanted to leave everything in a nice package. And the reality is they were not super wealthy people with a lot of assets. They were everyday run-of-the-mill people, but the things that they did have were taken care of and settled very, very easily.
Oh yeah, and the probate fees these days can wipe a family out. Like if you don't have this planned properly, California is a good example. There's states in the United States right now where the probate fees are so stinking high, the family have to liquidate a property just to pay for the stinking attorney fees, right? So it's just important to get it done right, so your family doesn't have to clean up the mess. It's hard enough losing a loved one. It's even worse, it's a bigger kick if they have to pay all these fees on top of that.
Yeah. So what would you say to somebody who is kind of on the fence? They're not exactly sure if they're a good candidate for a revocable living trust or if this is something they should pursue. What would you tell that person?
Well, call our advisement team. We can advise. We can look at your situation and we can best advise of what you're looking to do and what you're looking to go. You might start the conversation with the revocable living trust and you'll probably get a lot more out of it, because that's what our teams are to do. We're there to help educate and teach you what the value is. I don't want to be those guys that says start it yesterday, but in reality, if you've got a business or you've got a home or you've got assets or you've got kids, you might not have any assets, but you got a child or two. You got to get it done to make sure that they're protected. But call our team. We can walk anybody through that. The experience from our legal team to our business advisement team, we can find it, because there's no two situations the same, right? Every situation's different. We can walk you through the ins and outs of your situation and help you out properly.
Well, fantastic information. Thanks for joining us today, Dan. And for those of you who watched today, first of all, thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening to the Startup Show. If you've got an interest in learning more about revocable living trusts, give us a call. We'd be happy to help you. And now's a good time to ask you to go ahead and hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of the future content that we'll be bringing to you. Once again, this has been the Startup Show, brought to you by Inc Authority. I'm your host, Trevor Rowley, and we'll see you next time.